age 20 up, and it also doesn't include the Levi'im. So, if you do the math, right, so figure, I don't know, 650,000 adult men of fighting age, and, almost all of them have a wife, and most of them have a couple of kids. We're now up to like, I don't know, 3 million roughly. I mean, it's a pretty big number, right? So you would believe it would stand to reason that somewhere in the Sinai desert, right, there would be archaeological evidence of all these people, and I have to break it to you, there ain't. However, I also want to point out that at the end of the Torah, Moses points out to the Israelites that during their 40 years of wandering, their clothes miraculously did not wear out. And of course, they were fed by manna, so they didn't, have to leave, utensil, whatever. So in fact, the fact that there are no archaeological remains, we could say it actually proves the historicity of the Exodus rather than the lack of historicity, right? So today, as I said, I spoke about last night, we began reading the book of Numbers, right? And that is based on the contents, whereas the Hebrew names are based on the first significant word, and which is BaMidbar, in the desert or in the wilderness. In fact, I had a professor who later became a close friend, the late Rabbi Ben Hollander, and Ben taught classes at the Center for Conservative Judaism in Jerusalem, and his area of expertise was Bible with commentaries. If you've ever heard of Nahama Leibovich, Ben was her TA and her assistant for many years. So he was teaching the book of Numbers with Rashi, with Rashi's commentary. So, it was Hebrew BaMidbar in Rashi, and they translated that as in the wilderness with Rashi, right? As if, it was a course about how you survived in the wilderness with a French vintner who lived 1,000 years ago, right? But it covers the 38 years from the second year since the Exodus to the beginning of Moses' farewell address, and then the farewell address is almost the entire content of the next and last book, Deuteronomy. And this story of the wilderness is one which I think, as contemporary Americans, we don't like very much, right? The Torah tells us that this 40 years of wandering was a necessity, right? It's the wilderness period which really forged the Jewish nation. When we left Egypt, we weren't a nation, we were a rabble. And the generation that was raised as slaves could not become a new free nation. It was necessary for those who were born and raised in freedom to reach the age of maturity before we were ready to cross over the promised land, right? And this idea that you have to wait for something, this is not a message that we want to hear. We don't like to wait, right? I mean, the comedian Stephen Wright, that with the droll one-liners, he said once, I made instant coffee in my microwave and went back in time. But, and when I say we, I absolutely mean we. I mean, Kelly will tell you that I am the kind of person who will go from restaurant to find one without a wait, right? Rather than wait half an hour for a table, right? And she will also point out that usually that takes more time. But I don't care. I don't like to wait. And if you know, not too many of you have ever been a passenger in a car with me as the driver. Dee has, I know. If you were, you would probably say to me at the end of that ride, Rabbi, I never realized that you had served in the Navy. Right? Because I mean, I curse like a sailor when I am driving because, you know, the light turns red. Go, right? The light, what? You want to wait for another color? I mean, the light turns green, right? Right, go, right? You want to wait for another color that you like better? We don't. We have red, yellow, and green. That's it, okay? No waiting for another color that you prefer, right?
Are you going to cycle?
What?
I say, Terry, are you going to cycle?
Yeah, right. And you're not even from New York.
No.
Right? Right, so we don't like to wait, right? And the idea that we have to wait for some period of time is very, very countercultural. And we're also used to things being binary. It's either this or that. And you know, it's one of the societal changes that my heart tells me that I have to accept that people have a right to define who they are, with all of these people who are non-binary or post-binary or whatever it is, right? And my heart tells me that I have to accept that. My brain doesn't always find it easy to accept that, right? But that's the way things are. And one of the lessons of BaMidbar is that we need periods of transition, that they're really important. I'll give you an example. In legal and ethical terms, right, we are used to thinking of a person as either alive or dead, right? They're either alive or they're dead. That's a binary, right? Right, Dr. Comrade? Alive or dead. In halacha, there's a third state, goses. What is a goses? A goses is a person who is in the process of dying, right? And almost all of us have had a loved one who was a goses, and at a certain point, you stop praying for them to recover, and you start praying for them to have an easy transition, right? That it's not, you know, medically it may be binary, you're either alive or dead, but halakhically, there is this third possibility. And I think it's actually very, very useful to be able to think of people as a goses, somebody who's in the process of dying. Yeah.
There's now an emerging controversy in neurology about the concept of brain death and what exactly, where do you draw the line? And it's becoming increasingly ambiguous and amorphous.
Okay, so even medically it's no longer necessarily binary, right? You could be, maybe you're alive, maybe you're dead, depends on how you define it. And of course, when the concept of brain death first became acceptable sometime in the 60s, that was also, right? Because up until then, How did you define death? You stopped breathing. Right now, you can still be breathing, but yet dead. All right, so another area of transition where there's a lot of misconceptions is bar or bat mitzvah. There are two misconceptions. The first, which you've heard me, dray on about interminably, is that bar mitzvah does not mean son of the commandment, and bat mitzvah does not mean daughter of the commandment. Hi, my name is Chaim, I'd like you to meet my dad commandment. No, it doesn't mean son or daughter of the commandment. Ben or bat something is a legal term which you're capable of or reliable for. For example, a fetus that's born struggling is either bar kaima or not bar kaima, capable of life or not capable of life, right? And in the Haftarah that we read for Mahar Chodesh, we read any Shabbat when Rosh Chodesh is a Sunday. Saul says about David, he is Ben Mavet, right? What does Ben Mavet mean, right? It does not mean son of death, right? David is not David ben Mavet, he's David ben Yishai, right? So what does ben Mavet mean? Dead man walking, so to speak, right? He is marked for death, destined for death, or another phrase that you sometimes might hear from me when I'm in a bad mood, should be taken out and shot, right? That's what Ben Mavet means, right? But as we saw this morning, right, the second misconception is that when you become 13, you're an adult. Nuh-uh, right? Jacob, you paying rent? No. But you're 15 and a half, right? Why aren't you paying? You're an adult. Why aren't you paying rent? Right? Because you're not an adult, right? As I said, people become adults really sometime between age 20 and age 30. And in the Parsha, at age 20, you can fight in the army. Interestingly, 20 and not 18. Right? At age 20, you can fight in the army. And at age 30, if you're a Kohen, you are presumed mature enough to actually function in the temple. And as I said, it's from age 30 to 50. So as a Kohen, I would be retired. And I want to also point out, in case anybody says, yeah, Rabbi, that's a great idea, they still got paid. They just didn't function in the temple anymore, right? But the Kohanim got paid because there were certain tithes and dues and land that belonged to them by the right of being Kohanim, right? So this idea of the period of transition is really, really important. And the best book on this that I have read is a very short book by Michael Walzer. Michael Walzer is professor emeritus at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, one of America's leading philosophers, and his book is called Exodus and Revolution. And at the conclusion of that book, he makes 3 points. 1, wherever you are, it is probably Egypt. 2, the promised land does exist. But 3, the only way to get there is to go through the desert together, right? There are no shortcuts, right? And this idea also of looking at shortcuts, right? I mean, in American Jewish life, right, there's always the next great thing, right? The next great thing that will save American Jewry, right? And for a while, it was birthright, and for a while, it was day schools, and now it's high-quality adult learning. And let me point out, I am fully supportive of birthright. I am fully supportive of day schools, and you know that I am fully supportive of advanced adult learning, right? But if you are looking for the one sort of magic bullet that's going to revitalize American Jewry, or, you know, read the questionnaires from synagogues that are looking for a new rabbi, right? We want a rabbi who will revitalize our synagogue and grow our membership and make our services more lively. Somebody who's under the age of 30 and has 40 years of experience, you know, spends all his time with the elderly and, you know, is constantly working with our youth, you know, makes $50,000 a year and wears nice clothes and lives in a nice house and drives a nice car, and donates $60,000 a year to tzedakah. Right, so good luck. But, you know, the only way to get there is through the desert together. And the together part is really important. And there are no shortcuts. Shabbat Shalom. We continue with the Kaddish before Musaf and the Musaf service, page 155 in your Shabbat Siddur 428 in the full Siddur, and then we continue immediately.